Hello, in today's Sunday sit-down video, I am going to talk about one of my favorite mechanisms, hands down, in tabletop gaming, and this is I cut, you choose, and the various variants of it. I price, you choose is something that you'll see in this video, but it's all in the same theme of I cut, you choose. Last week I talked about my favorite worker placement mechanisms. This next week I'll be at Gen Con, so I won't have a video, but then I'll come back and I'll do my favorite engine building games after that. Those are my big three: worker placement, engine building, and I cut, you choose. So what is I cut, you choose? The real life equivalent of it is if I have a piece of cake and you want some of that cake and I want some of that cake. We say I cut, you choose. One of us will cut the cake. So say I'll cut it, and you get to choose first as to which piece you want. The idea behind this is that it incentivizes me, the cutter, to choose even slices. And if I mess up on that, then you get first priority in choosing the bigger piece, or maybe the smaller piece if you're not very hungry. And that little nuance there is what makes I cut, you choose in games so interesting, because what you want might be different than what I want. And when I'm cutting the thing, the row of cards, the tiles, whatever I'm pricing out, I have to keep you in mind. This is one of the things I love about I cut, you choose, that there's this really nice kind of passive but also a little bit direct player interaction, in that I have to put myself in your shoes and think about what you want as I'm making that cut decision. And really that segues into what I really, really love about this mechanism, which is that within a very small decision space, there are interesting decisions and interesting, almost asymmetric decisions for each player. The cutter is making a very different decision than the chooser is, or the pricer is making a very different decision than the buyer is. And I'm going to talk about in this video, as the label says, I'm going to talk about my top 5 favorite games in this category. I thought about making a top 10 list, but I actually struggled to find 10 games that really feature this mechanism. So I'm hoping maybe you'll have some recommendations in the comments. I have 10 games I'm going to talk about, but I've only played 9 of them, and there are 5 of them that I really want to highlight and talk about why I love the I cut, you choose mechanism in it, and what makes that mechanism unique. I'll also end the video in why I haven't used this mechanism in one of my designs yet, and some creative ways that I'm trying to think that I can use it. So let's start with We'll start with one of my favorite games, and one of the games to use this mechanism in a really elegant way, and that is Hanami Koji. This is a 2-player game that isn't only I cut, you choose, but it definitely features this mechanism in that 2 of the choices you can make each round, each player has the same 4 actions they can take. They can take each action once. And one of those actions, I don't know if I have this bagged up so I can show you. Yeah, I have it all bagged up. One of the actions, or 2 of the actions, are I cut, you choose. One of them is I have to choose 4 cards from my hand and separate them into 2 piles, and the person across from me chooses one of those piles, and I get to keep the other one and play that other one. The other I cut, you choose is I choose 3 cards from my hand. You choose one of them. So I'm not really cutting. I'm just choosing these cards from my hand. You are choosing one of them to keep. I keep the other 2. Both of these, especially in a 2-player game, and there's another 2-player game that I'll show you in a second, provide a really, really nice player interaction, because I really have to think. There's only one other player for me to consider in making this choice. The cutter has to choose, what's good for me, what's bad for them, what may not help them. Sometimes you might divide, like in the 2 and 2, you might divide. You might put the same cards in each pile because you don't want to give that person a choice. So you can even take away the power of choice sometimes, depending on what your hand of cards is. But what I really think helps this game work is that you have to choose these actions every round. You don't have a choice. Your choice is, when do you make that choice each round? When do you choose to make the I cut choice versus the other 2 actions that you can take? One is to bury a card. One is to bury 2 cards. One is to keep a card for yourself. So it's all about timing, when you use those versus when you give the other player a choice. But I really like that in a 2-player game, it does create It gives both players something to do on most turns. And it's nice when it's not your turn because you might be given a really interesting choice. You might be getting something from the other player even when it's not your turn. I really, really like that. Yes, that's Hanami Koji. One of my favorite I Cut You Choose games. One of my favorite two-player games. Probably my favorite two-player game right now. Let me segue into... Actually, I'll talk about one that I don't have. New York Slice is one that I don't have. A friend owns it. I really, really love New York Slice. In New York Slice, you are putting out these tiles that look like a pizza. They form what looks like a pizza. And then, kind of like the cake example that I gave earlier in the video, one player is dividing up that pizza based on where the tiles were originally laid out. So they can't like mix and match different tiles from different areas of the pizza. You randomly create the pizza, and the player then cuts that pizza into different slices depending on the number of players. It scales really well for different player counts because of that mechanism. New York Slice does some cool things with the I Cut You Choose. Like there are certain... the way the scoring works is that you are trying to get the most of certain slices. And if you don't have the most, you don't get anything. And the numbers, the points that you get equal the number of slices of a certain type that are in the pizza. So, for example, there might be a, what's an example? I don't know if pepperoni is good. Yeah, I'll say vegetarian. So say there's a vegetarian slice, and there are 5 of those slices in the game. They'll each have the number 5 on them to remind you that there are 5 slices in the game. And at the end of the game, if you have the most vegetarian slices, you get 5 points. Again, the number of slices, 5 points. Easy to remember. So you're constantly competing with other players to, and the valuation changes during the game because I might have 2 vegetarian slices, you might have 1, and the cutter might see that. This is a key element, I think, in I Cut You Choose games. The person who's cutting needs to have clear and easy visibility to see what other players want at any given time. Otherwise, the choice is a lot less interesting. They need to have a little bit of information about what other players want, and they need to be able to see that clearly on the table. And New York Slice distills this really, really well because there aren't a lot of different types of pizza or slices of pizza. I think maybe there are 7 or 8 different types in the game. So it's easy to look around the table and see, okay, I see that person needs this. See that person needs this. And you all often tend to focus a little bit on your own needs a little bit more than the others. New York Slice also has some pieces that you don't want. Normally, I Cut You Choose games often have this element of having a few different things that no one wants, that actually hurts players, or that circumstantially hurts players. And so you might try to, if I know that you really want that vegetarian slice, I might try to pair it with something that you really don't want or that is useless to you. New York Slice also has one other element. I said that you can't like mix and match the pizza slices. You have to cut it based on how the pizza is laid out. But the cutter does have one random token, I think it's called the Daily Special, that they can put on by itself or they can attach to any of the cuts that they made. And this gives them a little bit more control over one of those cuts for all the players. And also, in one common theme that you'll see in several of these games, the cutter in I Cut You Choose makes the last choice. So they still get some stuff from their cut, but it's the last one. They don't really have a choice, actually. They get the last slice, so they get the leftovers, which I think that works well. Although it leaves that person often without a decision, which maybe isn't ideal. And there's another game that from actually the same company that does give that last player still a choice to make. Let's jump over to another one that I have, another 2-player game. And this is probably the biggest stretch for I Cut You Choose games. This is Seven Wonders Duel. In this game, you aren't really cutting. You are doing a lot of choosing, but you can see on the back here, the way the cards are laid out, see how they're laid out over here? You can only choose from the face-up cards in this array. So on my turn, I'm choosing one card. So this card is face-up and that card is face-up. So I'm choosing one of those cards, and based on my choice, the other player, it creates access to new cards for the other player. So for example, if I chose this card, these 2 face-down cards would flip over and would become accessible to the other player to choose from. If I choose this card, then this next visible card becomes available. So even though you aren't actually dividing up things like the cake example I gave, your choice is determining the choices available to the next player. And so it very much feels like an I Cut You Choose game in that respect. But I like that in this game, the assortment of cards that goes out is random. You don't have control over that. And I really like that some of them are face down, so that oftentimes you're making the choice between something that you need and something that you need less or want less, and giving the other player, because it's only a two-player game, you're giving them a choice that is unknown. Those hidden cards might be something that you really want or something that you don't want. It might be something they want or something they really don't want. And so oftentimes when I play this game, I stick with certainty. I even because these two cards might be awesome for that other player, and I might want to prevent that other player from getting those really awesome cards, especially in a two-player game. I've often wondered if this same mechanism, which is just brilliant, I just love how this card layout works. I've wondered if that could work in a larger group game with more players. I'd love to see it work in that way. It could take up a lot of table space. The setup each round does take a little bit of time because you got to lay out all those cards again. But it would be really cool to see it work in a game for more than two players. Okay, now we're getting to the big two, really. Although Hanami Koji is definitely my top 10. Seven Wonders Duel has appeared on my top 10. I'll move these off the table. But this is one of my favorite games, period. It has been my number one. It varies somewhere in my top 5 from time to time. This is Isle of Skye. This is very much an I price you choose game, Isle of Skye is. So in this game, you play over the course of a number of rounds, plays 2 to 5 players. You are choosing, or you're not choosing, you're randomly selecting 3 tiles from a bag, and you're putting them in front of your player's shield. And then behind that shield, you are putting coins next to 2 of those tiles. So as you're doing this, it's simultaneous with all the other players. You're pricing these tiles at the same time as other players. And you're putting an axe next to one of them, so that when you reveal, when everyone opens up, removes their shield and reveals, the tile associated with the axe just goes away. It's not available. Which itself is an interesting choice, that you are saying to other players, I don't need this, and I don't want any of you to have it either. I'm just going to cut it out. That leaves 2 tiles with prices next to them. And on your turn, you are buying a tile that someone else priced. You can't buy your own tile at that time on your turn. So you're buying someone else's tile, or you're passing. And the price you play is the price they place next to it. So if I see a tile from across the table that shows 2 coins, I have to pay 2 coins, and that money plus the 2 coins associated with that tile goes to that player. So that player ends up with 4 coins total. They end up with the coins that they priced the tile next to, and they end up with 2 additional coins. The pricing in this game is so much fun because you're trying to... Oh, and actually, also at the end of the round, any tiles that no one has bought that you priced, you pay for. So the coins that you associated with those tiles just go into the general supply, and you get those tiles. And so there's this strategy in this game where you are trying to decide... You're trying to price everything so that you get more tiles. More tiles is generally better in this game. So oftentimes I try to price things pretty high so that no one buys them, and so I get to keep the tiles. But at the same time, I'm trying to price it so that high enough so that if someone does buy it, then I get a lot of money. And at times, maybe I just don't want one of those tiles, and so I'm trying to entice someone into buying it. So I'm trying to price it just high enough so that someone actually buys it. And I'm trying to make sure that I have enough money to afford all the things that other players are pricing. Because over the course of the game, people are going to price things higher and higher and higher as they have access to more money. So it's the pricing decision in this game is brilliant. And that's the cutting element of the game, how you're pricing these tiles. I just love how the pricing works in this game. It's so dynamic. Every player is involved in the pricing every round because you always have your own tiles to price. And it just makes for a really great decision. And because it's simultaneous, the game can play in like 45 minutes. It plays really quickly despite all these interesting decisions you're constantly making with the pricing and the buying. That segues into what has been my favorite game It's wavered between this and Time Storage, which is not at all an I Cut You Choose game. This is Castles of Mad King Ludwig, one of my favorite games, hands down. It's a game where you're building this castle of crazy tiles that fit together in different ways. You end up with a crazy array of tiles in this game. And this is very much an I Price You Choose game. And unlike Isle of Skye, there's only one pricer. There's the master builder at a time. So every round there's one master builder, and that player is taking all of the available tiles. Usually there are 7 tiles in a 4-player game, maybe maybe 6 at fewer player counts. And you are associating each of them with a different price. And the prices are set. I think they scale from 2 to maybe 12 or 14. So you're not actually choosing the prices. You're choosing which tile to associate with each price. And then starting with the player to your left, that player has the choice of buying a tile, and when they do, they pay you for that tile. So if I price something at $10,000, you pay me $10,000 to get that tile. This creates this fascinating dynamic in the game. Oh, and also the builder gets the last choice. So this goes back to one of the games. New York Slice. So you actually do get a choice in this game because usually there are multiple tiles left over that you get to buy at the end. But you can only buy one. Each player can only buy one tile. And so the price in this game just makes it really, really interesting. I'm trying to price things to entice people to buy them. That's really, really important in this game because the main source of money in this game is when you buy something from me as the master builder. But at the same time, there are probably some tiles that I really want or that I know will score a lot at the end of the game because there are some very visible end game goals. The players also have some hidden goals, so I might see that one player seems to be buying a lot of garden tiles. So I might think, okay, that person really wants garden tiles. I'm going to price it a little bit higher. So I'm always paying attention to what other players are doing, which can be a little overwhelming in this game. Especially with the small text on the tiles. But it's pretty easy to look over at someone and see, okay, they have a lot of this tile type or maybe this tile size. And it's also, you can always default back to the global goals. There are always some global goals that you can look at to see what all players are going after in the game. But I love the pricing mechanism in this game, how one player has that decision every round, and it feels good for that player. They have the really interesting decision of where to price things. They get a bunch of money when they do that, if they do it well. And the other players have an interesting decision of how much money do I really want to give this master builder? I'm weighing that versus how badly I want a certain tile. So that I really like. I mean, the core feature of this game is that you are paying the master builder. That is a brilliant design decision, and it creates so many more interesting decisions in the game than if you were just paying money to the general supply. So there are 5 other games that I'm just going to go over really quick because many of these I haven't played in a while. Namely Oceanos and Animals on Board. They're both very solid I Cut You Choose games. I would gladly play them again, but I often choose these top 5 games that I mentioned over those 2 I Cut You Choose games. Oceanos, I recall, does something interesting. Oh, I can't remember. You have to look. I have a favorite mechanism video about it, and it does something cool with I Cut You Choose, but I can't remember offhand. Sword Crafters is a game that hasn't come out yet, but I got to play a prototype of it during the Kickstarter campaign, and I really liked how the I Cut You Choose worked in this game. Especially, like you lay out this tile grid at the beginning of each round, and one of the tiles is the first player tile. So I really like that the first player tile is included in the big batch of tiles. And the idea of cutting in this game is that you're taking a sword and cutting the tiles in half, or cutting them however you want. And both players are actually involved in the cutting of this game. I think it goes like you cut, and then I cut, and then you cut again, and then maybe I cut again. I think I get the last cut, and then we buy. It's something like that. Maybe there are only 2 cuts, but I like that both players are involved in the cutting process, and then both players are involved in the buying process. Animals on Board I don't remember enough about to talk about, but it is a solid game. Zooscape is the most recent I played. I bought this in the hopes of rounding out a top 10. I played it. I talked about it in a very recent video, so you can check out that for my favorite mechanism. Zooscape tries to do something that I don't think works, which is that all players... So one player cuts, and then all players simultaneously choose which side of the cut they want. And what this ends up doing, we choose simultaneously. We choose first or second, the first or second pile of cards in this game. And by doing this, it does two things that just don't work. One is that it creates a lot of stalemates where like a couple people choose the first pile, a couple people choose the second pile, and then no one gets anything, and you just pass to the next person, and that person does another cut. I don't like those types of stalemates where just nothing happens on that turn. The other thing that happens is it really takes away agency in this game. Yes, you're trying to figure out what other players want, but really the main decision of the game is the cutting decision. When you're choosing, because you don't know what other players are choosing, you just don't have that much control over what actually happens. Like, even if I really want the first pile, me choosing first may not have any impact on the game at all, because other players might be choosing that too, and then nothing happens with that pile. So I don't think simultaneous choice works in an I cut you choose game. I really think it works better if players are choosing one at a time as to what pile they want. And last is Skyward, which a friend let me borrow for this video. I haven't actually played Skyward, so I can't speak to the quality of the game. It does look beautiful, but I have heard that this is an I cut you choose game that I absolutely need to play. So those are 10 I cut you choose games separated into my top 5, and then some other games that I admire that I would gladly play. Before I ended, though, I wanted to talk from the design perspective a little bit about why I haven't used this mechanism. Given that I love it so much, I've used worker placement so much, I've used engine building so much, why haven't I used I cut you choose? And I think the reason is, I've thought about this a lot, is that I like games that flow really well from one turn to the next. And often this means that there are no rounds in the game. You're given a very simple choice on your turn, you make that choice, and then the game keeps flowing around and around. There aren't really rounds. There are, Viticulture does have rounds. We're publishing a couple games that do have rounds. So I'm not against rounds, but I in my design process, I lean highly towards games that just progress from turn to turn. And I Cut You Choose doesn't work well for that, because I Cut You Choose works really well when one player has that I Cut You decision, and then each other player has a choose decision, and then you clean up whatever you were doing, and you do it again with the next player being the cutter. So that's why I haven't used it yet. But I have started thinking about ways that I Cut You Choose or I Price You Choose may work well with the flow that I like in games. And one of the ideas I've been playing around with is kind of combining a few of these different mechanisms where in my tableau I have, and this is just a random thought, I haven't really developed this, but I'm thinking this might have potential, where I have 3 set prices, like in Castles of Making Ludwig, how the prices are predetermined. Say $1, $3, $5. So those are on my mat. They're laid out on the mat, and I get to associate cards with those prices. So say I have a hand of cards, and on my turn, if any of the slots are open, then I have to put a card from my hand into that slot. Basically, I'm creating a place for other players to buy cards from me. I'm pricing those cards. And so on my turn, I'm filling in one of those slots if another player has bought a card from one of those slots. And I'm also buying a card from another player. So you're constantly creating new slots from other players. And at the same time, I'm also pricing things on my own. I don't even know if that's quite I Cut You Choose, but it is I price, and I'm also choosing. So potentially I'm doing both of those things on my turn. But I think that flows well, because I'm making this very easy decision on my turn, very simple decision, maybe not easy. And so I'm often cutting and or choosing, and then it just goes to the next player, and they do the same thing. And we go around the table kind of building our tableau of cards that we're playing, that we're buying from other players and then playing over the course of the game. I haven't gone any further with this idea yet. I don't know where it will go, but I think there is potential for an I Cut You Choose game to have that type of flow, where it's just continually flowing. You're not ever breaking for a round break. You're just taking turns over and over again. So if you have any other ideas of ways to do that, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. This video is run a bit long, but it is a mechanism I love, so I'm happy to talk about it. If you have any I Cut You Choose games that you really, really love, or if you have any thoughts about what you enjoy about the I Cut You Choose mechanisms or I Price You Choose mechanisms in the games that I mentioned today, I'd love to hear about that in the comments as well. This is a mechanism that I really love and that I'm happy to talk about. All right, that's it. I will see you in 2 weeks, not this next Sunday, but I'll see you in 2 weeks, or you can join me on Tuesday for my favorite game mechanism video. I'm going to talk about Cursed Court this week, a game that I just played for the first time yesterday. All right, take care. Have a great day.